Masechet Yevamot Daf Yod Bet. We're going to start off with three different co-wife cases. Co-wife of a remarried divorcee, which actually we learned about already on the previous daf. But the sages asking and answering the question the previous daf were from Bavel. Today we're going to see the Israeli version of the same question, although the answer is going to be a copy. But the question is from the Amoda Eretz Yisrael. Then we're going to talk about the co-wife of a minor who objects b'ma'enet, which we're going to say is forbidden. The co-wife of an Ailonit, which also we say is forbidden. And then we're going to see the halacha l'maaseh. Rava thinks the last case is actually permitted, and Rabbi Yochanan thinks in all the cases the co-wife is permitted. So quite a lot of controversy about these cases. Not sure how often they came up. And the second part of the daf on the other side is going to be some controversies about contraception that have actually some relevance even today. So we begin. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Rabbi Yochanan ba'ed. Rabbi Yochanan from Eretz Yisrael asked a question. Hamachazir gerushato misheniset. In other words, a couple is married, they get divorced. She goes and marries a second husband, divorces him, and comes back to her first husband, which is not allowed. Nevertheless, it's only allowed. So if they do kiddushin, that next marriage, the last marriage, is valid. It does take effect. If he dies, and now she is a Yevamot, what will be the law regarding the brothers? So we're assuming right now that she herself is prohibited. She was prohibited from that for her first husband, so it makes sense that she would be prohibited to the brothers as well, to the Yavam. And the question is, Sarata Mahu, what about if that first husband had a second wife? And so now when he dies, even if the wife who was divorced and remarried, even if she is prohibited, what about the co-wife? That's the question. Amar Rabbi Ameh, v'tiba elechi gufa. Rabbi Ameh tells Rabbi Yochanan, why are you asking about the co-wife? Why not ask about the gerusha herself, who comes back and remarries her first husband? Is she allowed or not? And so Rabbi Yochanan explains his question and says, no, I didn't ask any question about her herself. Because we can apply this following kal vachomer. Regarding she who is b'mutar la asura, if she who is forbidden to one who was previously permitted to her, meaning her first husband, this wife is prohibited to her first husband, who she originally was permitted to. So Basurla, the Yavam, who is the brother, who is prohibited as a brother-in-law, all the more so is going to be prohibited now that she is divorced and got remarried, right? So the point is that she is prohibited even to the deceased brother himself before he died. And so all the more so, she will continue to be prohibited to the Yavam. So that we can learn from a kal vachomer. That's why I didn't ask about the Yevamot, herself, about the wife who divorced and came back. But my question is regarding the co-wife. Is this kal vachomer that we have regarding the wife who was divorced and came back? Does that kal vachomer, is it so powerful that it will not only reject her as to be a valid Yevamot, but even her co-wife? Or maybe not. Maybe the co-wife didn't do anything. She was just a perfectly good wife. And so therefore you could do yibum with her. That is the question. That's why I didn't ask about her herself. All that is one version of the question. Now we have a second version of the question. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak matnehachi. Amar Rabbi Yochanan bar Abba, ba'er Rabbi Yochanan, machazir gerushato misheniset mahu. So far it's the same. Rabbi Yochanan asked a question of remarried divorcee. What is the law? Amar Rabbi Ameh v'tiba elach sarata, and Rabbi machazir gerushato. Right. So in the first version, Rabbi Yochanan asked about the co-wife. In this version, Rabbi Yochanan asked about the remarried divorcee herself? Is she permitted to perform yibum? This is what be a mess. Is why are you asking about her? Ask about the co-wife. And the answer is Sarata lakami ba'yalid. Says, I'm not asking about the co-wife. That's a simple case. Because even if you have this kavachomer, the same one we did before, that kavachomer has nothing to do with the co-wife. The co-wife is permitted to the first husband, and therefore she should be permitted to perform yibum. I have no question about the co-wife that's permitted. But I'm worried about the remarried divorcee. Is that although we have that kavachomer that this remarried divorcee is prohibited to her first husband, all the more so her first husband's brother, because now she's also a sister-in-law. And so that therefore for her, I would say maybe it's prohibited. On the other hand, it is for a mitzvah, and the mitzvah can undo a brother-in-law edva. And so maybe even though she is a remarried divorcee, that's only a problem for the deceased husband because they were married before and now they can't get married again. But that is not a problem for the surviving brother because he was never married to her in the first place. So it doesn't matter that she went and got divorced and came back. All right, so that's two versions of the question. According to the first question, first version, the question is for sure the remarried divorcee is prohibited, but maybe the co-wife is okay. According to the second version, the co-wife for sure can do yibum. The question is about the remarried divorcee herself. And now we have the answer. Now the answer here is the same as what we saw on the previous staff. We have a baraita that says if a man has two wives and one of them is keshera, meaning can marry a kohen, and one cannot marry a kohen. Maybe she was already divorced from a previous time or whatever, and now that man dies. The brother, if the yavam wants to do chalitza, he should do chalitza on the pesula. If he's going to do yibum, he should do yibum with the one who is kosher. Now, my keshera, my pesula, alma. So what does this mean, kosher or not kosher? If you think it means that kosher means she can marry anyone, including a kohen, and pesula means she cannot marry a kohen. But for the yavam, it doesn't matter. Now, yavam can perform yibum or chalitza on either one. So why would it matter who he performs yibum on or who chalitza on? So it shouldn't make a difference. So rather, there must be a different explanation of those words. Pasul and kasher. Elalav keshera le pesula le. Keshera means that the yavam is permitted to marry her. Pesula means the yavam is not allowed to marry her for some reason. What would be a reason? What would be such a case where he could marry one and not the other? So it can't be a case of edva. If if one of the wives is his daughter or a wife's sister or something like that, because then he would be pasul to the co-wife also, right? That's the 15 cases. So how can we have a case where he can marry one but not the other? It must be that one of the wives is a remarried divorcee. And so here we can learn that the remarried divorcee is the pesula one, but the other one, the co-wife, is permitted. He can, if he wants to perform yibum on the co-wife of the remarried divorcee. And now we can answer the question, right, that a remarried divorcee is in fact permitted. We already assumed this in the second version of the question, so this would be an answer to the first version of the question, that yes, she is permitted. Okay, then we reject it. We're going to go back to our original explanation of this baraita. It means that one can marry a kohen, one cannot marry a kohen. And you had a problem with that interpretation, which is if since the yavam can marry either, can do yibum with either, what's the difference? He can choose either one. The answer is because of Rav Yosef, the Rav Yosef. Kanshana to be lo yishpoch adam meboro v'achrim serichim lo. Rav Yosef applied the statement of Rabbi that a person should not pour out his water from his well, and if others need him, maybe he doesn't need it. His field is already irrigated. He has enough to drink, so he'll just waste the water. No, let someone else drink it. Don't waste. And the application here is that if the brother is going to do chalitza, if the Yabam is going to do chalitza, and one of the women could have married a Kohen before that, and now you're going to do chalitza on her. Well, once she, a chalusa, has a similar law to a divorcee, then you're taking a woman who could have married a Kohen and making her pasul le Kohen. And now both of the wives are going to be pisulim le Kohen. So why, just because you don't want to marry her, why do you have to ruin her chances of marrying someone else who is a Kohen? So that's the same as, pour, you don't need the water, so therefore pour it out. No, better to take into consideration that one is kosher to a Kohen, so leave her alone. Don't do yibum or chalitza don't do chalitza with her. Do chalitza on the one who is already pasul la kehuna, and therefore she has no loss. Her status doesn't change. And that was the advice. So actually, it makes perfect sense in that baraita. I think if he's going to do yibum, then it does say yibum. He can do yibum with the keshera if he likes her, better, and so that won't harm her because now she's happily married, and so that'll be just fine. So he has a choice in that case. I think the point of saying that he should marry the keshera is he could marry the keshera without any consequence. Ta'ashema. So therefore, this is no proof either way. We're going to try a second proof that will fail. Hamachazir girushato misheniset hi vesarata choleset. So this baraita says someone who remarries his divorcee, and then he dies. She, the remarried divorcee, and her co-wife both have to do chalitza. Now, this doesn't make sense. You never have two wives have to do chalitza. Only one does chalitza, and she is the shaliach of the other. Do you really mean both of them? No. What we mean in the baraita is he or the vav sometimes could mean and, so could mean or. So we're reinterpreting it, not necessarily changing the words. Okay. So according to this would be a proof that the co-wife requires chalitza. You cannot do yibum with the co-wife, right? Because it says you need chalitza both with her and with the co-wife. So there you go. There's an answer, right? No, you already reinterpreted the baraita because you can't read it simply. So once you're in the mode of reinterpretation, so do a little bit more reinterpretation and say he choleset, sadata o choleset o miyabemet. What we mean to say here is she herself, the remarried divorcee, must perform chalitza. She has no choice if you can do it with her, or if you want to do it with the co-wife. With the co-wife, you could do chalitza, or you could also do yibum. I know it doesn't say that. All right, so you add a couple of words, or at least interpret it as if you're adding a couple of words. And that's what we meant to say. One of them has to do something. It only mentions chalitza because the co-wife has to do chalitza, but Sarah also would have to do chalitza, or she could do yibum. And so maybe the answer is that yes, she can do yibum, and so therefore it's not definitive. And we move on to the next case. Okay, so koi for a remarried divorcee is just as left open-ended in the Israeli version as it was in the Bavel version. And now we go on to the case of a co-wife of a minor who objects. Amar Rav Lili bar Memal, Amar Mor Ukva, Amar Shemuel. So Shemuel saying all this. That's important because he's going to keep talking, but later. Sarat mema'enet asura. Mema'enet means a ketana, a girl who's less than 12, who, if her father marries her off, that is considered a marriage deoraita, and she can't get out of it. But if the father dies, and then there's a mother or an older brother, then she the mother, let's say, marries her off as a minor, then that is only considered kiddushin midirabanan, and she has a chance to object while she's a minor. Before 12, at any time she could say, listen, thank you, mom, for setting me up here, but I don't like this guy. And she can object, and retroactively that marriage is nullified. She was never even married. It's true, maybe it's not clear if they sleep together, if she's a minor or not, doesn't matter. Anything that happened during that marriage is considered nothing. She could marry a kohen. Okay, so that's mema'enet. Now, here's the case of, by the way, one thing to add to this is another case of mi'un d'Rabbanan could be with a father alive. If a father marries off his daughter and she divorces that guy while she's still young, then the father no longer has a right to do mi'un b'doraita. If he does marry her off again, then it's the same status as the mother doing it, which is midrabanan. So you could have a father who marries off his daughter as a minor, and she could still do mi'un. That's going to be important because we're going to apply such a case to sarat habat. Okay, so right now, here's the case. A man is married to two women. One is an adult, not related to anyone, and the other one is a kitana. And she performs mi'un, and he dies. So no, the other way around. He dies and then she performs mi'un, right? In other words, he dies and then now the brother, let's say his name was Reuven, and now Shimon is called upon to do yibum with either of these two, and she does mi'un. She says, "Listen, that marriage to Reuven from to begin with, I never wanted it, and I object to it." An amazing thing, she can even object to the marriage after her husband dies. That actually works. And then retroactively, she was never married. Okay, so she is not going to do yibum because she's not eligible. She was never married to the brother. But what about the co-wife? Since she can't do it, how about the co-wife? Shemuel says asura. Okay, so now we're going to analyze this case. Leman, she is prohibited to whom? Who is she prohibited to? Is it to the other brothers, the brothers who did not come to do yibum? To whom, right? The idea is that one brother would come and say, "Hey, I want to do yibum, or I want to do chalitza," and she would say, "I refuse you." So that's Shimon, right? I refuse Shimon. To Shimon, she would be prohibited, and her co-wife would be prohibited because there was a moment of zikah there that was broken. So for sure he would be prohibited. But what about the other brothers who were not involved, right? They were not even there. They didn't do yibum or chalitza or anything, and she didn't do mi'un to him. What about them? Are they also prohibited? And so the answer is hashtahi gufa sharia damashimuel mi'ana bazeh muteret bazeh saratami baya. And so it says that wouldn't make sense because she herself, the kitana, who does mi'un to one brother, Shemuel said she herself is permitted to the other brothers because retroactively she was never married. And therefore the other brothers are nothing to her. Only the brother to whom she did mi'un, there, it's true, even though retroactively she was not married, but there was a moment when she was supposed to, she had a zikah yibum, and then she broke it. So because there was a moment when there was yibum and it wasn't fulfilled, so she herself is prohibited to the yavam, but permitted to all the other brothers. So if so, her co-wife for sure is going to be permitted to the other brothers. So we're not talking, it can't be that the Shemuel is talking about the other brothers, but rather it must be to the Yavam only. And he still nevertheless says that the co-wife is prohibited. He says the co-wife is prohibited in that case, only in that case. And now we question that. Why are you being so machmir? What's the difference with the other brothers? How come we say the other brothers are permitted? That's what Shemuel said. Because they didn't do anything. They didn't do any act. They didn't come before her to do yibum or chalitza. She did not object to them. They were not involved at all. So too, the co-wife, she was also not involved at all. She didn't do mi'un. She didn't do anything. And so therefore, the yavam should be, who was refused, should be permitted to the ketana's co-wife. Shemuel, how come you said it's prohibited? And we answer, gezerah mishum sarat bito mema'enet. Oh, it's a gezerah because if you permit that case, then you will come to permit the following case. So this is sarat bito mema'enet. We have here two brothers, Reuven and Shimon. Reuven has a daughter who is a child who's under 12. And this would have to be a case where she was already married and divorced, and that's why she can still do mi'un, even though she has a father, right? That's why I introduced that before, so we can explain this case. because most cases of mi'um is when the father died, and then the mother or older brother is marrying her off. But here she actually has to have a father alive, so it has to be she was already married. All right, she went through a lot already, and now she is married off after Moshe. And Reuven marries her off as a ketana to his brother Shimon, and that would be niece marriage, which is totally permitted. Now, poor girl, after she was divorced, and her now she's also widowed, all before she's 12 years old. Okay, and now she does mi'un, and she says after Shimon dies, she says, you know what? I never wanted that marriage. I object. Retroactively, that marriage was nothing. Okay, and now the question is, Reuven, can he take Miriam? Because Reuven has to do yibum from Shimon. Can he do it with Miriam? And the answer is no, she cannot. He cannot do it. Even though, actually, why not, right? Because technically, because Rachel was never married to Shimon because she undid it retroactively. And so therefore, if they were never married, then Reuven is just taking Shimon's wife, which is a regular case of Yibum. So we cannot allow mi'un. The reason why Shemuel prohibits in all cases the co-wife of a mema'enet is because if you allow it in other cases, then you will allow it in this case, and we don't want to allow it in this case because it looks the same, and we don't want to allow it. So therefore, we make a gezerah of this case to all other cases, even when it's not a father, when they're not related. Okay, so that's why Shemuel prohibits all cases because of this case. But now we're going to ask this case itself, what's wrong? If they were never married, why can't he do it? Sarat bito mema'enet mi asira, is in that case prohibited? V'hatenan v'chulan imetu o mi'anu sarotehen mutarot. Our very first Mishnah in our Perek said, in all cases of erva, where one of the wives is an erva to the yavam, if she had died beforehand or performed mi'un, then the co-wife is permitted. In other words, as long as when Reuven, Shimon here dies, that whoever it is, whenever the brother dies, if they were not related at the time because she had already done mi'un, already died, already divorced each other, so then it does not prohibit the co-wife. So therefore, this case should be permitted. Okay, so demi'ana beman. So who did she refuse? In the case of the Mishnah, ila deme'ana be'ba'al hainu gerusha. Right, another one on this list was also gerusha. So which means that if a daughter is married to her uncle, and then they get divorced, and then the uncle dies, so then the father can do yibum because when he died, his daughter was not related to his brother. And so if you're talking about mi'un while the husband is alive, then that's the same as divorcing. It's the same case. So you wouldn't need to say it twice. So rather Mishnah must be talking about when she does mi'un after the death of her husband, and she does mi'un to the yavam, and nevertheless it says saroten mutarot, and therefore this case itself should be permitted. And if the case of sarat bito mema'enet is permitted to the sarah, then Shemuel should permit in all cases, because we only said Shemuel's prohibiting because of this case. But this case, according to this reading of the Mishnah, itself should be permitted, right? This case here should be permitted according to the Mishnah, right? Because it says not only gerushin, but also mi'un. Must be that she did mi'un with Shemuel, right? And then we say, no, not necessarily. La le'olam be'ba'al. In fact, she does mi'un to the husband before he dies. And we're talking about two different ways of divorce, right? One is regular divorce, which applies from that time forward. Another type is mi'un, which goes retroactively, but it wants to include both cases. And so you can't learn anything about mi'un from the Yavam case. We ask a question on that. Hold on, what does it matter who she does mi'un with? When she protests the marriage to the husband while he's alive, then retroactively it uproots the entire marriage. So too, when she objects to the Yavam and say, I refuse you as a Yavam, as mi'un, that she also that is affected because it uproots the original marriage. So therefore, it's uprooted either way. So therefore, what is the difference? And if the Mishnah says that uprooting a marriage means that the co-wife is permitted, then it should be permitted in this case. And it doesn't matter if she protested the marriage while Shimon was alive, then for sure Reuven could marry Miriam. That's what the Mishnah says. But what does it matter if she does it after Shimon dies and she then does a protest? Actually, she's protesting her father, right? Or maybe another brother. And so what's the difference if she does it after he died? It's still undoing the marriage retroactively. And since they were never married, Shimon and Rachel were never married, they're not related. And so Reuven, therefore, can take Miriam. It's not Sarat Bito. It's not Bito is not related, is not related to Miriam anymore, not related to Shimon anymore. And so what's the difference? And the answer is it's optics, right? It's unseemly, as we're going to see. Mishum detane rame bar Yechezkel. Detane rame bar Yechezkel mi ana baba'al muteret le'aviv. Bayavam asura le'aviv. So here is a little bit more complicated case where if Rami Bechezkel says if this ketana objects to her husband, she can marry her previous husband's father. And if she only objects after her husband dies and she objects to the Yavam, then she is prohibited to their father. Why? Alma mishat nefila nir'et kekalato. Because from the time that the husband dies and then one of the brothers is called upon to do yibum, so then everybody looking is like, oh, I guess they were married, right? She never objected during the lifetime of the husband, so it must be that she was fully married. And now all of a sudden she's going to go marry her, what was her father-in-law? Well, everyone's going to say that seems really strange, right? Because it doesn't look like, people are not going to recognize that she objected after her husband died. At that point, it's like well known that's a father-in-law. Before the husband dies, then, everyone knows, oh, it's a ketana, she can, right? But so this would be even more unseemly if she does so after the husband dies. And that is okay, good. So that is the reason why there's a difference between before and after. So we apply that statement also to this case. Mishat nefila nir'et kesarat bito. So right back to this case. If in fact we have Reuven marries off his daughter to Shimon and she objects while Shimon is alive and then Shimon dies, that's totally fine. Everybody will say, yeah, Reuven can take Miriam as a Yevamah, right? No one will have a problem with that. But once Shimon dies, then the recognition is that, they were married. She never objected while he was alive. And so then it seems like they're married. So at that point, if Reuven takes Miriam, everybody's going to say, oh, he's taking his daughter's co-wife. That's not allowed. And even though technically she does Yibum after he dies, and that Yibum retroactively undoes it, but kind of intuitively it doesn't work as well. So even though technically it should be okay, it's not seemly, and therefore it's prohibited, at least midrabanan. All right, and that's the case. And now we understand that case. So that was the minor who objects, who is forbidden. That is Shemuel's conclusion and the conclusion of this sugya so far. And now we get to the co-wife of an Ailonit, who we say is forbidden. Amarav Aseh. Sarat Ailonit Asura Shene'emar Vayihab Bechor Asher Teled Perat Ailonit Shena Yoledet. Ailonit is a woman who never fully develops and cannot bear children. And now she is married to this guy, and the guy dies. So the co-wife of the Ailonit also is prohibited. The Ailonit herself does not do Yibum, because the whole point of Yibum is to have a child to remember, continue the legacy of the deceased. And the Ailonit cannot have a child, so there's no point in doing Yibum. If the brother would do Yibum, then it's just erva. And we learn this from the pasuk that says "Habechor asher teled," the firstborn son that will be born. Now the Rebbe is going to do something else with the bechor and learn from here that the oldest brother has the obligation. But the peshat is that the firstborn that will be born to the yavam and yevama. So the rabbis learn from here that yibum only applies if this woman can give birth. If she's an ailonit, then Yibum does not apply. If Yibum does not apply, then she is erva, right? Because that's a sister. It's a regular case of sister-in-law. Like as if they had kids or as if he was alive. Same thing. And therefore, since she is in erva, since the Ailonit is in erva, the yavam to the yavam. So that's then. Therefore, the co-wife is also prohibited. Like all of the cases, when one of the wives is an erva to the yavam, then the co-wife is also prohibited. Like the 15 cases in the Mishnah, and that is Rav Aseh's reasoning. Good.
Rabbi, the Ailonit is different than a minor.
Is different than a minor. That's right. A minor eventually can give birth, can have a child. So a minor.
Okay.
Could do yibum if she didn't object, right? A minor doesn't object, says, okay, I'll take the brother, then that's fine. That yibum would take effect. So that's right. The problem with the minor was that she objected, right? But Ailonit doesn't matter, even if they both agree. You cannot do yibum. There's no point. Good question. Mativ Rav Sheshat. Shelosha achin nesuin, shelosha nashim nochriyot. Okay, we're going to have this question is going to be a little bit roundabout, so we have to go through this case. We're going to see what the force of the question is soon. We have three brothers who married three unrelated women. Nochriyot doesn't mean they're non-Jews, means they're not related to each other. Umet echad behem v'asa ba sheni ma'amar. And one of them dies, and so the second brother who has to perform yibum, he doesn't do yibum right away. Yibum would mean he takes her and has sexual relations with her. Then it would be yibum. He doesn't do that. He does a type of kiddushin. We call it ma'amar, even though she's not necessarily a minor. We're just calling it ma'amar as to say it's kiddushin midrabanan. He says, I designate you. I'm planning to do yibum with you. And so, we're together, and, no one else should come and do yibum, and no other brother, no other co-wife. I'm going to do it. So they already create, at least midrabanan, a zikah, even more than a zikah. They're like, almost it's like a kiddushin. Umet, and now the second brother who did the ma'amad, he dies. At that point, they have to. The next brother has to do halisa and cannot do yibum. Shene'emar umet echad mehem yevama yavo aleha misha aleha zikat yavam echad velo zikat shnei yevamim. And we learn this because it says if one of them dies, so her brother-in-law will come upon her and do yibum. Only if there's a requirement of one yavam and not of two. So here's a picture. We have three brothers. They're married to three different Sarah, Miriam, Sila. Okay, Reuven dies without children. And Shimon does this ma'amar. Says, we're going to plan. We're going to plan to do yibum. So they're kind of almost married. And now Shimon dies also. So now Sarah is stuck because she has to do yibum to uphold Reuven's name, because that wasn't finished yet, and Shimon's name. So it's like a double yibum, and that's the law. You do not do a double yibum. You see, if he didn't do ma'amad, let's say she's married to Reuven, dies. Let's say Shimon does full yibum, and then he dies, so that'll be fine. Then the Levi could take her, right? Or if he did not do ma'am, he did nothing. Reuven dies, she goes to Shimon. Shimon dies before he gets a chance to do yibum, and doesn't do ma'amad either. So then that's no problem. Sarah will just go to Levi, because Shimon, they were nothing. She's just doing yibum with Levi. She could do it with any of the brothers, and that would be for the Reuven only. But now that Shimon halfway married her, so now she has to uphold the name of Shimon and uphold the name of Reuven, and you cannot do two in one. That's the rule. Okay, the Katani Allah. Now regarding that baraita, Amar Rav Yosef, Zohi sarat eshet ach me'av she'isur nefila garam la shelo masinu bechol haTorah kula kegon zot. Rav Yosef has a note about this case, and says this is a case of the co-wife of the Sarat Eshet Ach Me'av, the co-wife of a paternal brother's wife. So that is where every case of Yibum is going to be a paternal brother. It only happens with paternal brother, and a wife, his wife's co-wife. Fine. This is a case that where it's prohibited, right? Usually such a case is permitted, but in this case it's prohibited not because of any problem in and of herself. It's not because she's adva or anything, or or was Gerusha who came back. No, but rather it's because she fell to Yibum. That itself caused her to be prohibited. And we found no other example anywhere in the Torah like this, right? The point is that the reason why Sarah is prohibited to Levi is only because Shimon was presented as the Yavam to her, and they did Ma'amad. Otherwise, she would have been totally fine if Shimon was not in the picture, right? So Levi could have done it if it was only he and Reuven. It's only because of falling as the Yevamot to Shimon that prohibits her to the next brother. And there's no other case like this. That's what he says. Now, what do you mean no other case like this? Why are you telling me there's no other case like this? What case might you have thought would be? Zohi lemeutemai lav lemuta sarat ailonit de sharia, or must be it's limiting the case of ailonit, because the point is an ailonit herself can marry any man. She's not related to anybody. She's not erva or anything, but she cannot do yibum. And so, so this would be a case of it's the same. It's the brother. It's the paternal brother's wife, co-wife, and nevertheless, just because this ailonit, it's the prohibition, because an ailonit cannot do yibum, and therefore her falling to yibum and being prohibited of doing yibum makes her co-wife also prohibited. If you say it's prohibited, then this would be a second case where the becoming a Yevamah is what makes the co-wife prohibited, and then you would have two cases like that. But Rav Yosef said the first one is the only case that's like that, the case of three brothers with Ma'amad. And so what is he excluding? He's excluding the Ailonit case, so it must be Ailonit is permitted. Not she herself, but her co-wife can do Yibum. Must be that's what he meant. Okay. And then we say, no, not necessarily. La, lemuta sarat ailonit de asira. Umay zohi de isur nefila gadam la sarata baya chalisa, ailonit afilo chalisa la baya. And then we say, no, when he is excluding it, you're right, he is excluding ailonit, but the opposite direction. Because you see, in this case, the other brother has to do chalitza, right? Whereas the case, another one does, they can't do yibum, but there is some connection. And the third brother in this case here has to do chalitza, where that's the only case where falling to yibum would cause them to be prohibited from yibum, but even the co-wife, but still has to do chalitza to one of them, whereas that excludes ailonit. Ailonit is totally prohibited, And so therefore it's excluding this to say you don't even have to do chalisa, you don't have to do anything, not her and not the co-wife, right? Because it's Isur Erva, just like in the cases of our Mishnah, the 15 cases, when it's Isur Erva, then no chalitza or yibum even necessary. Okay, my ta'ama, ha deoraita, ha derabanan. And the reason that right, well, what's the difference between them? The Ailonit is exempt from yibum mid deoraita, right? As we saw the source of it. And therefore, she is an erva to the yavam, fully erva. In that case, no chalitza. Whereas the other case of the ma'amar, with between the yavam and the yavama, that is only prohibited midrabanan, that she's falling to two brothers. She has to do yibum for two brothers, so that's only prohibited midrabanan because that ma'amar was only drabanan. Therefore, you can't do yibum, but you still have to do chalisa. All right. Now, tenan vecholan im metu. Another question on that from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah, if you remember, said, Kulan imetu o mianu o nitkarshu o shenimseu ailonit sarotehen mutarot. We said that in all the cases in our Mishnah, if the forbidden relation died, she died, or rejected the marriage, or divorced, or was found to be ailonit, then the co-wife is permitted, because in all these cases, see, we're going to see nimseu ailonit, and then the co-wife is permitted. So look over here, you said the co-wife of an ailonit is permitted. We said it on Mishnah, and this is a challenge to the law we said we are discussing, who said that the ailonit is the co-wife of the ailonit is prohibited. You're going against the Mishnah, and we said no, la kashya kan shekirba kan shelo hekirba. The Mishnah, we'll start with that, is when the husband, this first husband, did not, the one who dies, did not know she was an ailonit at the time of marriage. Okay, if you marry someone and you didn't know she was an ailonit, and it turns out, after some years, you get the diagnosis, she's an ailonit. In that case, he can come and say mekach ta'ut. This whole marriage was under false pretenses, right? You sold me a lemon. And therefore, he can undo the marriage. This is a second case of undoing the marriage that we're seeing today. And that for that reason, she is the co-wife is permitted, because undoing that marriage, nullifying the marriage as a mekach ta'ut would be similar to divorcing, right? To divorce that they are not married at the time that he died. And therefore, there is no more erva, and so the brother can marry the co-wife. That's what the Mishnah was talking about. Whereas Rav Asi, who said our statement here that says asurot, that was talking about where he knew that she was an ailonit before marriage. You could still marry her, it's fine. But you knew it, you can't claim now mekach ta'ut, and that's the case that he's talking about, that he said, well, since when he dies, now you have an ailonit, and ailonit cannot do yibum, and so since she can't do yibum, she is nisur erva, and that's why the co-wife is also prohibited. And you know what, this actually makes sense. In the Mishnah's language is that she was found to be an ailonit, which suggests that she was only found to be afterwards, not that she was, that we already knew that she was. Shema mina, and therefore that answer makes sense. Okay, very good. But now we're going to have a challenge, a different opinion to that. Amar Rava hilcheta sarat ailonit muteret va'afilu hikir ba va'afilu sarat bito ailonit. He disagrees with Rava and thinks that the co-wife and ailonit is permitted, and not only if the first husband didn't know she was an ailonit and finds out after, in which case you undo the whole marriage to begin with. Of course, that case, that's the Mishnah. Even if he knew she was an ailonit, and even in the case of sarat bito, right? Remember the sarat bito over here that we said, oh, we have to prohibit all cases because of this. Or sarat bito, rather, in an ailonit case, if the Ailonit was Sarat Bita, right? This was a Mema'anet case, but imagine the same case where she is an Ailonit, and then even if it was found out, even if they knew already from the beginning that she's an Ailonit, nevertheless, he permits Reuven to take Miriam. So Rava's reasoning has to be altogether different. His idea is that because she's an Ailonit, she's out of the picture altogether. Right? She's not she's not involved in the boom. She doesn't even start to be a question of can she do yibum, since she's out of the picture altogether. Therefore, Reuven can take the co-wife, right? Even if it's related to her, or even though it is her sister-in-law, right? Should we just ignore her because of an Ailonit? So it's not that she's an Ailonit and therefore she cannot do yibum, so she prohibits. No, she's an Ailonit, she can't do yibum, and therefore she's irrelevant. And if she's irrelevant, she does not prohibit the co-wife. That is Rava. Quite an amazing statement. Wait a second, Rava. The Mishnah said that she is found later. So doesn't that mean only if she's found later to be Ailonit, not if she's originally Ailonit? The answer is Taneh Shehayu. No, read the Mishnah as saying Shehayu. Doesn't matter. It's Lav Davka. Okay. Kiata Ravin Amar Rabbi Yochanan. That's Rava. But now Rabbi Yochanan, when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he reported the following ruling: Achat sarat mema'enet, v'achat sarat ailonit, v'achat sarat machazi girushato, kulan mutarat. These are the very three cases that we've been discussing today. So Rava permits in the third case, and Rabbi Yochanan permits the co-wife in all of these cases. The first case, we never had a solution, and in any case. And the second two, we did see Amoraim who forbade, but Rabbi Yochanan argues that they are permitted. All right, and that concludes a series of questions. And now we're going to see something that is related, but also a new topic of contraception. In what cases is one allowed to use contraception? Taneh Rab Bevai Kamed Rab Nachman Shalosh Nashim Meshameshot Bemoch. So the form of contraception they had in those days is to take some fabric and insert it probably before relations. There is some Rishonim say it will be inserted after relations to soak up the seed, but that wouldn't be very effective. Okay, so it looks like it's inserting it before to prevent pregnancy. So what are the three women who may use it? And another version says must use it, which we'll see why. Ketana me'oberet emenika, a child who's married and is allowed, someone who is already pregnant, and a woman who is nursing. All these may use contraception. Why? Ketana shematit abed v'shematamut. Because if a child should get pregnant, she may die. Her body is not ready to bear a child. Okay, we're going to ask later, can a child even get pregnant? Was it talking about, let's be someone kind of on the borderline, who may be under 12, may not have simanim of puberty, but may be still close enough to get pregnant. Okay, so it would be dangerous for her to get pregnant. Me'uberet shematase ubaraha sandal. If she's already pregnant and she then has relations, she may, according to this, get pregnant again, and then there'll be no room in the womb left, and one of the fetuses will become deformed. Sandal will look like a sandal. And so that is dangerous. Now, I'm not going to go into the science of this, and it doesn't seem that a woman can get pregnant again when she's already pregnant. Did they think it's possible, or maybe something else? Just somehow the process will smash the baby, or something like that. Whatever it is, they thought it was dangerous. And so they said you can use contraception if you're already pregnant. Many kashem atigmo ben Yevamot, and the woman who's nursing, because if she becomes pregnant while she's nursing, then her milk will dry up and the baby will die. They didn't have baby formula back then, so therefore a nursing mother can also use contraception. Okay, very interesting. Ask your local doctor before you follow any of these scientific observations. Anyway, what's our point? When we say ketana, who is allowed to use contraception, it means when she's from 11 years and 1 day to 12 years old and 1 day, right? So that entire 11th year is when this would be dangerous. Less or younger than that. Okay, I know this is not appropriate nowadays, but the olden days, whatever. This is what happened. Maybe it happened. Maybe we're just talking theoretically. But if a child would have be married off and have relations before she's 11, well, in that case, it's not dangerous because she cannot get pregnant at all, and so we don't have to worry that she's going to get pregnant and die. And if it's over 12, then also it's no problem because then she's ready. Her body's ready to bear a baby and she won't die, or at least it's not any more dangerous than an adult. She's an adult at that point. All that is bimeir. He's the lenient one. Hachamim omerim, achat zo v'achat zo meshameshet kedarka veholechet. Umin hashamayim yirachamu, mishum shenemar shomer petaim Adonai. Let me say, no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if she's 11, if she's 10, 11, 12. She should have relations. She can have relations without contraception, and Hashem will protect that she will not get pregnant and die. Because Hashem helps those who are in need. Okay, this is kind of strange because we don't usually just rely on a miracle and put ourselves into a dangerous situation. It must be the Chamim think that it's not dangerous. The point would be that either she's too young and will not become pregnant, or she's old enough that she can bear a baby and then she'll be okay. So he doesn't think that there's this in-between time where she will get pregnant but die if she does. Okay, so why are we bringing all this? Because you mentioned the case that perhaps we are afraid, according to the first opinion, that she may become pregnant, and perhaps if she gets pregnant, she will die. Only perhaps. It is possible, even when she's 11 and a half, that she could get pregnant and give birth, not die. Okay. Mikelal deika ketana demi abera velo meta. Ken masinu chamoto mema'enet. Oh, so we see from here, if it's possible for a ketana, someone who's under 12, to become pregnant and give birth and not die, so then we can have a case of chamoto, of a mother-in-law who refuses her husband. Right? In other words, you can have a case where someone will fall to a yavam, and the yavam is the mother-in-law. The yavama is the mother-in-law of the yavam, and yet she can still do mi'un because let's say she gives birth before she's 12, so she can refuse her husband, and in that case, she will not even have been married. Even though she has a child from the marriage, right? You can have a child from a husband and yet retroactively undo it. And this is a problem because in our first Mishnah, we said, after the statement that we quoted earlier, that said, if you get divorced or mi'un, then you can take the co-wife, and it says, listen, you can never have a case of Ailonit. Ailonit, you couldn't have a case because she can't have children, and mi'un, you can't have a case of a mi'un if among the 15 cases with the case of a mother-in-law or mother of the mother-in-law or mother of the father-in-law, because since they already had children, it must be that they are fully married. And so now that's the question. On the one hand, the Mishnah says it's impossible to have a case of mi'un and the mother-in-law, because we're assuming that a minor cannot bear a child. And now we just said that a minor can bear a child. If a minor can bear a child, then she can bear a child and still do mi'un, and she would have a mi'un case. So we answer, Ema shema titabed v'tamut. No, maybe the language in that baraita should not be, take out the word shema. Not maybe she will give birth and maybe she will die, but maybe she will give birth and for sure die. In other words, between 11 and 12, if she gives birth, she will surely die and not have a child. So indeed, that baraita is not saying there's a possibility that she can bear a child before 12. She could get pregnant, but then she'll die and not bear a child anyway. And therefore, that's why the Mishnah says that there's no such thing as a case of mi'un. There's no possibility of mi'un in the case of a mother-in-law, because a mother-in-law by definition has a child, and a child cannot bear a katan cannot bear a child, and so therefore that's why they can't do mi'un. Okay, so we answered the question by changing the language of the Braita. Damar Abba bar Levi, givul yeshla, קודם הזמן הזה אינה מתאבדת כל עיקר. תוך הזמן הזה היא מתה וברה מת, לאחר זמן הזה היא חיה וברה חי. And this would follow the statement of Rabbi Bar Levi that there are defined limits. Before that limit, whatever it is, well, we defined as being 11 years old, she cannot become pregnant at all. After that time, and perhaps it's different for a different woman, but the standard would be 11. After 11, she can be she can become pregnant, but there's no chance the pregnancy will be viable. In fact, she will die because of the pregnancy, and the fetus will die. Afterwards, from 12 on, then she is like an adult and can bear a child and be healthy, and the child will be healthy. And so therefore, according to this, there is no possibility of anyone under 12 ever having a child. And so the Mishnah is upheld, because the Mishnah says you cannot ever have a mother-in-law who did mi'un. Because if she's a mother-in-law, she had a child. If she had a child, bore a child, then she is herself more than 12. Okay, challenge to that. Ini veha taneh Rabba bar Shemuel. I ata yachol lomar b'chamoto ve'em chamoto ve'em chamiv shenimsu ailonit o sheme'anu shekevar yaldu. Oh, here we have this baraita taught by the Rabba Shemuel that has a similar language to the Mishnah, right? You can never have a case of a mother-in-law or mother-in-law's mother or father-in-law's mother that would be an ailonit. They can't be an ailonit because they have a child, so they can't be infertile, or that they would object while they were children because they already had a child. So there you go. It says that they in fact do have a child. And so you can't say what we said before, that someone who's under 12 does not have a child, but rather it means something else. We'll go back to that, but in our Braita, put the word Shema back in, that maybe as a child she will give birth and maybe she will die, but maybe not. And according to this, in fact, someone under 12 could possibly bear a healthy child. But now we have a problem because it contradicts the Mishnah. So we answer as follows. Amar Rav Safra, Banim harehem kesimanim. Rav Safra says an important principle that if 11-year-old, or however old she is, if she bears children, that is the same as a sign of puberty. And those, when we see if someone is a katan or not, 12 is just the average. But in fact, one can do an inspection to see if she has hair. For a boy also, we see if the child has hairs on their privates, and if they do, then that is a siman that they have passed puberty. They are now a gadol. And Rav Safra's principle is if a girl has a child, then that itself is a siman. There's no greater siman than that she is past puberty. And so therefore she's no longer a ketana. So if she's 11 and she happens to give birth, then she cannot do mi'un because by definition, she is an adult. By definition, meaning that she gave birth. So therefore she's an adult, she cannot do mi'un, and that explains the Mishnah. Okay, and to add even more to that, V'tamre banim adife mesimanim. And others say that not only that, having a child is even better than a siman. A siman is just an outward sign to see what is the development of her body. Is she developed and past puberty? Is she ovulating and so on? But these are only outward signs. If someone actually has a child, there's no better sign than that her body is now in adult mode. Okay, what will be the difference between saying that they are like simanim or that having children is even better than a siman? It's the extra one to say even better than simanim. That would be even acceptable by Rabbi Yehuda. In general, Rabbi Yehuda, if you're only looking at hairs, he would say, no, 2 hairs is not enough. You have to have mostly more black hairs than not. It has to be, majority of the area has to be full of black hairs. So he's kind of delaying the time of simanim. But even he would agree that no matter what the external signs are, if someone actually bears children, there's no better sign than that. Okay, fascinating discussion. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen.